my favorite things about being a member of Gideon Rescue Company is actually doing the gospel, the practical part of what Jesus wants you to do, which in this case was going to the Bahamas for Hurricane Dorian response.
Yeah, it was an incredible hurricane. Category 5, sustained winds of 200 miles an hour. Even eyewitness on the ground reported some incredible phenomena that we haven't seen before in disasters, and that is, simultaneous tornadoes touching down in this particular hurricane as well, destroying everything in their path. So we have this small team, this small rescue team, and what sets us apart, I believe, from other rescue teams going into these disasters and situations can really be summed up in an adage probably all have heard. And what is that?
A person can live 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, 3 minutes without air, but no time at all without hope.
And that's so true. I mean, even the research that is out there, I mean, people, once they give up hope, it's almost like game over in a survival situation. So we see this a lot, that one of the greatest needs, in fact, I'd say it's a misconception we find in disaster scenes, is that, people need food, shelter, water, those things first to be stabilized before you ever talk about anything spiritual or even mental. But what we have found is that that's often what people need first. And that's huge. And that's what we saw specifically in our latest response to the Bahamas with Hurricane Dorian.
Oh, yes.
So there's a lot of things that obviously come into play when we respond to a disaster. Equipment, personal bags and gear. And one of the pieces of equipment that we're really excited about on this particular disaster was none other than a creature craft rescue boat, right?
Yes.
What is a creature craft, Cor?
It's the ultimate whitewater rescue boat. You can be in this boat in insanely wild whitewater, and you never have to fall out of the boat and swim because you're strapped in. And if the boat gets in a bad situation, it has an inflatable roll cage so you don't fall out. And you're strapped in to your seat. Yeah.
So this was a leap of faith, not only for us to bring this boat, but we had a church behind us that had stepped out in faith to buy this boat. And so it was kind of like the christening journey for this boat to go to. Well, actually, we didn't even think we were going to the Bahamas first. I know a lot of us were thinking that maybe the storm was going to hit Florida, a direct hit.
That was the forecast.
Yeah, that was the forecast. So we were headed to Florida to respond ahead of actually when this hurricane was going to hit. But we have this other group that we work with, which is Aerobridge. And Aerobridge is an incredible group. They're basically a broker for aircraft. And their whole mission is to try to supply resources into an area. So food, water, teams, whatever it may be, that's needed in these disasters. They're private. They're not connected with the government at all. And so they actually had flights for us coming out of Florida, and they redirected us to the Bahamas.
People who volunteer their planes and their pilots to fly in. Usually it's the private plane owners themselves are flying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's really a neat concept and a total providential connection that we had with these guys. And they basically were like, hey, we've got all these planes and supplies, but we don't have boots on the ground. It looks like you guys have boots on the ground, but you guys don't have planes or ways to be transported. So how about we work together and we'll provide you with air support if you get us information and establish a connection on the ground.
So in pre-hospital care, Brock, there's the golden hour. What is that?
Well, the golden hour, it's really simple. And we all know this. The reason why we have fast ambulances and the reason why we have fast helicopters and anything, in our first response that is quick is because we recognize from the time an injury occurs, we literally have minutes to take a patient from the scene of the accident to the hospital.
Time is of the essence.
Time is of the essence. And they call it the golden hour. And it literally, within 1 hour, if we don't get the patient to definitive care, surgery, you name it, their chances of survival plummet. But we've seen the same principle actually played out even in the spiritual realm. That from the time a disaster or a crisis or even an accident occurs, that the clock begins ticking, where people are wounded not just physically, not just emotionally, but perhaps even most importantly, they're wounded spiritually. And they need they need the help. They need that somebody to give them hope and encouragement so that they can continue through a very difficult time.
The clock is ticking on multiple kinds of help that are needed.
So we made it to Ocala, Florida. That was our insertion site. They were going to pick us up in Ocala. They were going to insert us into the Bahamas, to Marsh Harbor specifically. That's on Abaco Island. And they finally found a pilot who was willing. I mean, at one point they even had a pilot who was willing, but then he backed out. He had cold feet. So they finally found another pilot who was willing, right? And so he arrives, and it was incredible. Like, this guy, woke up on his yacht with his wife, heard about this mission, signed up with Aerobridge for the mission, and they said, we've got a team of rescuers that we'd like you to insert into Marsh Harbor. And he said, sure, no problem. And so we met with him. He came there that morning, actually. Flew to us all the way from, I think, Great Lakes, somewhere up there, maybe Michigan, where they were flying from on their yacht. And he landed his little jet, and he got out, and we talked to him. And just an incredible guy. And we told him about the security issues. We said, hey, we're not positive that this is a secure situation. And he said,
I've been to Mexico in dicey situations, and that wasn't a problem. Let's go. Really?
So we flew in on an Eclipse. That was the jet that he had. It was this tiny little Eclipse. We weren't able actually to fit the boat on that particular plane, but he flew us directly into Marsh Harbor. We first actually tried to land at Treasure Key, but it was just pretty chaotic there. Not a lot that we could necessarily find for shelter and setting up a chain of supplies.
Well, there wasn't a lot of need there.
Yeah.
And there was need, but not like at Marsh Harbor.
Yeah. So we moved over. He actually flew us over to Marsh Harbor, which is just about 15 miles directly to the east, and we landed there at the main airport at Marsh Harbor. What did you see when we landed? What were you thinking?
I thought Hurricane Michael was bad, that hit Florida Panhandle 2018, a year ago. That was a Class 5, Category 5, and this was Hurricane Michael, but stronger, and the time it stayed on the ground was way longer, and 23-foot storm surge. I don't know how people survived. I really don't. I know that a lot of them didn't, unfortunately. And the houses were just a pile of rubble. Everything was just a pile of rubble. There wasn't anything left.
And I'd speak to that too, because the reports that we're getting in the United States, 50 confirmed dead, but thousands still missing. The truth of the matter is that this wasn't a disaster in which 50 died, but thousands upon thousands. And those were the eyewitness reports that we were receiving. People saying that, there was a shelter full of men, women, and children, 300, and the whole shelter collapsed and everybody in it died. Or at one point during the lull in the storm, thousands of people tried to flee for their lives to the center of the island, to the government center that was still standing, and nobody's ever seen or heard of those people again. So unprecedented, really, the destruction. And we see this with tornadoes, that type of just sticks, rubble, nothing left. And that's what we saw. Just incredible destruction on every hand.
What it is, it's a preview of the end of the world. This is what it will look like. Only not on a few islands in the Bahamas, but the world over.
Yeah, it's a sobering thought to think about that, biblically speaking, Jesus talks about this, in Matthew 24. When you see these things happening, when you see natural disasters increasing, wars and rumors of wars, realize that this is the beginning of sorrows, is what Jesus actually says. And it was so powerful, to be there on the ground and to see that, wow, this is the beginning. An incredible thing to think about, that the world over, is going to be experiencing this on a global scale. So one of the things that has been great about working with Aerobridge is that they have been willing to fly us in on these aircraft. And then the follow-up with that is whatever supplies that you may need, like whatever personnel you may need, let us know, we'll ship it directly to you. So then we become a point of distribution for aid that's coming from all of their partners here in the United States. And that's exactly what happened. When we landed, it was all of a sudden aircraft after aircraft after aircraft, general aviation coming in with supplies, food, water, essentials that are needed in these disasters. And then it was our job to offload those supplies. But we quickly realized that when we landed that this was such a desperate situation, the name of the game was evacuation.
Yeah, it was very different. Like Hurricane Michael was give them supplies. Here it's get them out of there because there's nothing left for the people that survived, who made it through.
Nothing left.
Yeah.
And I had a chance to tour the harbor and the clinic, and it was the same situation. At the clinic, there's thousands of people at the clinic just waiting to try to evacuate. And at the harbor, the same situation. Thousands of people waiting for ships or boats to get out.
At the airport, people would just come and wait, and they didn't know how they would get out of there. They would wait a day, 2 days, 3 days to try to get a seat on any flight out of there. We heard reports that it was $2,000 a seat to get out, and that was just to another part of the Bahamas. So they're there waiting, and they don't have food and water or anything else, really. Mm. So what we did was we loaded up our cart with food and water, and we would just roll around to the people that were waiting. There was a lot of people waiting on the public side of the airport, and we would just give out food, give out water, baby supplies, hygiene products, medicine. Did a couple of little first aid missions. But it was really interesting. When we were handing out the water, of course, everyone wants it. But some people would actually say, no, I have enough, but I want those glow tracks right now. Or I want the books or the papers you have. We would ask people if they want to pray. And they would gather their family. They wouldn't just casually say, yes, pray for me. They would gather their whole family. Everyone would hold hands in a circle and say, hey, we're going to pray now. And then after prayer, they would say, thank you. Nobody else has offered to pray with us. We've seen all these other people around here that are helping, but you are the only people that has offered that kind of help. And they were very appreciative, yes.
Yeah, I remember distinctly there was one little lady. She was so sweet. She was the one that we went and found the personal hygiene products for. And that's what's so amazing about these disasters is that you never know like what will show up on the plane, right? What people donate. It's incredible. The things that you think like, oh, like if we only had this, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, like somebody actually sent a brand new steel chainsaw, in the box, right? Or generators, or, I mean, you name it. I mean, it's incredible to see what is actually gifted and donated and given. Right. And we had these little packages that were personal hygiene packages. And you have to remember, this is something that we may think is very simple, but it's very profound. Like when you haven't bathed for days,
or
right?
Brush your teeth,
no running water, haven't brushed your teeth.
Yeah.
Personal hygiene is like, I mean, it really wears on people.
It's a real morale booster to have.
It is. And so this little old lady, we were like, oh, wait. In this box, we saw some like personal shower. They were like these little shower wipes. And so we ran back, we got them, we gave them to her. In addition to giving them to her, we gave her a book, The Desire of Ages. And she was so excited to receive the book. Not just the personal hygiene, she was just floored that we found something that she could at least, clean up a little bit. And she was most excited about the book. She said, I have been here for days without anything to read. She says, I'm going to read this book. So she was so excited, and we were excited because it's like, oh man, like what an opportunity, right? I mean, The Desire of Ages is actually listed by the Library of Congress as one of the greatest commentaries on the life of Jesus. So what an incredible opportunity for her to be connected with that hope that will continue to give her encouragement through a difficult time. So one thing that we wanted to really highlight was that God put us in the perfect spot, the perfect location. We had a small team, the laborers are few, the harvest is great, but yet here we were in Marsh Harbor, and all of the people were streaming to us because the airport was such a beacon of hope for people to try to get out of Marsh Harbor. So that was incredible to see. That we wouldn't have had the time or the hands to go out into the community. But God set it up so that people came right to our doorstep.
We were right there, positioned in the nicest accommodations on the island in the customs department of the airport, which was made it through the storm with power, and they kept it secure, and we could keep all the things in there nice and safe, and then give them out through the day without a problem.
So every mission has an end, and we knew that this mission was coming to an end. I know one thing that, I was thinking, like, man, it's just we just got here, right? 3 days. This is a shorter mission stint for us than typical, but the situation was changing dynamically. The United States had been asked to come help. They were now bringing the Marines and the Navy and the Army, and they were setting up for a major operation to bring in C-130s. Huge helicopters are landing, all throughout the day. So it was quickly being a worldwide response.
And Aerobridge said that they weren't sure how much longer they could easily fly us out, and so we wanted to be a team player with them. And so when they said they had a plane that was big enough to pick us all up, that we accepted that offer, although it was hesitantly because the need was still so very great. But I believe there was God's providence for us to accept that plane ride, and that was a kind of a special plane ride.
Very special plane ride, because at this point they actually had flown us our boat. So our boat actually made it, but it actually never got unpacked or never actually got inflated. It was actually never used in the way that we wanted it to. And that was disappointing, I think, for us. We were so excited to use this boat, right? But, the need was so overwhelming just with the people that were at the airport. We quickly shifted gears and were trying to work with as many as we could that were just there with us.
Right.
But there was still a purpose for the boat. Because had we not had the boat, the boat itself was 640 pounds and lots of extra gear. And they were looking for a specific aircraft that would be large enough, capable enough to fly us and our team and the boat back to the United States. So the pilot comes, he picks us up, he's looking at all of our equipment, and he says, yeah, it's a lot. And as we're there kind of loading our equipment, one of our other team members, Patrick, looks at the pilot and he says, I recognize you. And the pilot's like, well, okay, my name is so-and-so. And Patrick says, no, what's your last name? So the pilot tells him, oh, it's my last name. And Patrick he lost it. He was like, oh, my goodness. This is so incredible. This is amazing. I can't believe it. Well, come to find out, this guy was apparently a sports celebrity.
Very successful.
Very successful. Yeah. Corey had no idea who he was. I had no idea who he was. Our other team member had no idea who he was. But Patrick knew who he was because he'd seen him on TV.
Well, here's what I like about it, right? God didn't fly us on just anybody's plane, but someone who's willing to accept a certain degree of risk, like what we are willing to work with. I'm thankful that we had someone who's willing to accept a high degree of risk, and especially, as the pages turn and he sees the value of putting it out there for someone else's benefit.
This pilot, he was amazing. He was incredible. He was one of the most humble, laid-back guys I think I've ever met, especially for owning a brand new plane. Right, this plane was brand new.
A $5 million brand new plane.
Yes, brand new plane, and posh leather seats. And here we are with this dirty team. We haven't bathed in days. Our equipment's nasty. It's just all of this together is a lot to put on this luxury plane.
Well, God provided the tarps. Everything was wrapped up in the tarps. Praise the Lord, and we got out of there with a good due amount of respect to his aircraft.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was great. He was so kind and loaded up. He's just like, just be careful of the seats. But we were able to get it, on the plane safely without causing any damage or grease marks on his nice seats. And he took us all the way back to Florida. We got through customs, and what was incredible to me was after we got through customs, we were all sitting there talking, and he looked at us and he said, what is it that you guys really do? And so we kind of were sharing him this vision, right? That people need hope, they need encouragement. And this is what God has put on our hearts to do. And he said, well, where do you guys live? I said, well, we live in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And I said, okay. I said, you're not too far from me. You're about, a couple hours flight from where I live. I said, I'm retired now. And I basically take care of some farming duties, and I take my kids to school. But other than that, I'm pretty much free. Like, here's my personal cell phone number. Next time a disaster happens, why don't you just call me? And we can reconfigure my airplane. We can put cargo straps in it. We can box your stuff up. We can make this work, and I'll just take you directly to the next disaster.
You know, the
Right.
Lord, when he sent his disciples out in the first mission trip for the 12 disciples, he told them to go without money or a backpack or extra shoes or extra clothes. And then one of his last conversations before he's crucified was, when I sent you out without those things, did you lack anything? And all the disciples said, no.
Nothing.
We didn't lack anything on this trip. We thought we needed a cell phone charger, a solar panel thing. We didn't need that. The airport had power. We thought we needed to buy a cart. There was exactly the kind of cart what we needed, saved between two demolished vehicles, but the cart was okay. We thought we needed a communication satellite device. Well, by miracle, one of our phones worked just there on the island anyways. And they sent a communication specialist with like all kinds of radio communications going on that I don't even know what he had working. But, you know, these things we think we're going to come into need and be without. But the Lord, you know, it's the same now as it was then. When I sent you out there without those things, did you lack anything? We've never lacked what we needed to accomplish the mission. And this is going on almost a decade now, since the 2010 Haiti earthquake. We've never lacked.
It's incredible to think that God has so wonderfully provided. But if he cares for this small, ragtag, no-name team, then how much more does he care for the people of the Bahamas that have just been through this disaster? Mm-hmm. You know, and that was just a powerful connection. I remember that, sitting down with that guy on the bench and saying, you know what, if God would send us halfway around the world just to meet you in this moment, to give you hope and encouragement, then he would do that just for you. And that's the whole point, you know, is that, man, we serve an incredible God. We believe that Jesus is coming soon. And this is why he's sending us out.
He tells his disciples to pray the Lord of the harvest to send forth laborers for the harvest, because the harvest is plenteous, but the laborers are few.